So my role really looks at innovation and understanding the latest market trends, in particular with regards to AI, and what can we do as a business to drive new product innovation and ideas that we can take to market. So the key focus for today's presentation is the booking journey and what's happening as a result of AI. So I think we all know that the e-commerce booking journey hasn't changed in over 30 years. It's still assumed that your guests know exactly where they want to travel, the destination, the dates they want to travel, and the party size. Now, while the latter may hold true, the former certainly doesn't. And today, 70% of guests have no specific destination in mind when they start thinking about the booking journey. And if I was standing here this time last year, I'd have said to you social media was the #1 place that I've gone to get that inspiration. But now with the rapid evolution of AI, Gen AI has completely changed the game. It's displaced both search and social media as the #1 place your guests go to start getting their destination inspiration and to start beginning that booking travel. And really, that is the biggest shift in the distribution since the rise of the OTAs, or the online travel agents. So the key questions we get from all of our customers today is, how can I remain relevant? How can I become discoverable in these channels? And how can I become bookable? But most importantly, how can I ensure that what happened in search doesn't happen in AI, i.e., all the top queries and responses are dominated by the OTA providers? So really, to unpack this further, we have to kind of understand what AI is doing or causing in terms of a shifting guest behavior. Our guests aren't using these channels because of the latest, coolest new things. It's like the latest hype. They're using them because they got bored of the passive, biased results that search delivered. And in fact, what AI does, it provides the customer with a much more immersive experience where they can be part of the conversation and control the narrative and can co-create to define the exact answer that they want. And the stats are overwhelmingly evident in terms of what that means, that this is a channel there to stay. So 84% say it improves their experience. But more importantly as well, 80% says it saves 1 to 3 hours per booking trip. And we know that we're all time poor, so that's something that we all need to very much factor in. So what does that mean in terms of marketing and how we target our customers? And what we're seeing is these queries that are surfacing are 2 to 3 times the length of typical search. So typical search on Google would be 5-star hotel, Singapore. Now through AI, it's 5-star hotel, Singapore, views of the Marina Bay Sand, within 5-minute walking to the MRT, and needs to have a gym, and a fully functional gym, not a gym that's in a basement. And you're starting to understand there, in the LLMs, the real guest intent. And so that's kind of where it enables that personalization and those recommendations to happen. So where is AI pulling the data to inform those decisions? And at the moment, it's predominantly pulling the data from the open web, SEO, search engine optimization. So if you don't have the right content to provide the answers to those AI goes and looks elsewhere. So it can maybe look at additional sources that it trusts, whether it be review sites, the TripAdvisors, your Wikipedias, a number of different sources, pulling together fragmented data from across a number of sources to provide the recommendation. And if it doesn't have the data, can't find the data, it guesses. Now, what does that mean really for hotels? So is SEO the right strategy? Well, actually, things are shifting, and there's a lot of changes and a lot of new standards that are coming out to help hotels get back in the front of the driving seat to be able to control how they show up in the channel. So as we said before, where we're at predominantly is SEO being very, very important. We are now moving to GEO, which is generative engine optimization. And this is where hotels are starting to think about how can I structure my data better and contextualize my data to make it readable and discoverable across these channels. But SEO and GEO are still very reliant upon public signals, so AI interpreting public signals to make the right response and the right query. Now, MCP is where it gets exciting, because MCP moves a reliance for AI on public signals to actually being able to connect directly to the hotel's source of truth to provide the answers. So for those of you who don't know, MCP is also a new open industry term called Model Context Protocol. And basically what it does is it allows these AI players to have easier access to travel inventory and data through a secure and governed connection direct to the hotel source of truth. Now giving back hotels control of how they show up, what data surfaces through these channels, and making sure that's not only accurate, but it's also providing the closed offers and the actions they want associated. So moving away from just data discovery to actions, which is really laying the foundation for agentic commerce, which is where A to A or agents start making autonomous agents start making bookings on behalf of the guests, without even touching the direct booking channels. So is MCP the answer? But today, MCP isn't yet a universal distribution layer. And what I mean by that is enabling MCP is one, but having these AI platforms or players consume MCP is another thing. And so it's not universally adopted as of yet. But within AI platforms like ChatGPT, they're enabling MCP through allowing hotels and brands to build native apps within the AI channels. The key issue is, within those apps, you have to call them out. So for instance, for them to be discoverable at present, it's at Wyndham, at Hyatt, so you can call out those apps. So everybody still asks me, well, is that really a natural, intuitive guest behavior? My answer is no. Like, I'm not sure how many of you would actually use that instinctively to call out for others as a discovery process. So people will say, well, but what is it? Is it like a vanity exercise for brands? And I say, no, it's not. It's so fundamentally important to start building those connections into these channels to be able to map and see how you show up and where your data gaps are. And we do believe there has to be a transition where your discoverability is a natural passive discovery as opposed to guests calling those apps. That's not happening yet, but that's where we believe the industry is going and needs to go to. So MCP is one thing. So MCP allows you to be, let's say, discoverable and get you more in control. But we all know that AI is only as good as the data that feeds it. And what we're seeing is there's lots of gaps in the data. But nobody knows more about the customer, more about the hotel, than the hotels themselves. So what we're looking at is how can we help hotels build out what we call a golden hotel profile. Like we've talked in the industry for years about the golden guest profile. Well, actually now what's important is a golden hotel profile. Being able to map all your different data sources into one place to really enrich your data. So it's not only about looking at your attributes, it's looking at your FAQs, it's looking at your sentiments, it's looking at your contextual, it's looking at kind of your accessibility, bringing that all in one place. And then what we need to do is we need to break it down to, these sources are very, very valuable. Which sources are your superpower? Which sources do you want to keep and ensure? And then what you need to think about is, knowing that, how do you then start like governing the data the same way you do ARI? Like we've spent years in the industry today is looking after availability, rates, inventory, about how it maps up across different distribution channels. Well, data should be treated exactly the same, because we're not saying that you don't want to share your data across different sources. We want to give you the control, the guardrails, and the governance to ensure that you can do that. So if you want to just pass really your most valuable data purely to your direct channels or direct to AI, you can do so, as opposed to going through the different indirect channels. And that becomes really important. And that's why when you start thinking about enabling MCP, it is best to do it at the core of your source, your universal source of truth. And the reason for that is when we move and shift to A and agentic, A doesn't want to come and negotiate through a third-party channel or intermediary. It wants to know it is getting the most accurate data, the validated, that timestamp, that this is the most accurate, that it can, when it's making a booking, that is what is available and the latest and the best results. And a key factor in this as well is then, to remember that almost correct data is not good enough. So when we start doing discovery amongst hotels, we're starting to see within your source of truth, if you have content that might be accidentally there that still references COVID, that still references that gym that opened 2 years ago, this becomes an issue because then it makes the AI think that you have not got the latest data in the right places, so then there's a risk of it looking elsewhere. So almost correct is not good enough. Your data strategy is the most important thing to define right now. And just lastly, in terms of like summarizing that up, you know, we can't reiterate enough that we don't know what AI is going to look like. We're all together as an industry, coming together to kind of to scope out the future, to make sure you're ready for that future. But the one thing I can say to hotels today, categorically, is start governing and start thinking at things right at the center and your source of truth. Because if you take the risk of exposing through one channel all of your content, it's very hard to bring that back and to control how that looks going forward. So it is a journey. We are on a journey. There's a lot of talk out there. There's a lot of hype. But I think, as we said, this is ever evolving, and I think it is very, very exciting. But I do think if we can get on top of it now, I do think the biggest opportunity is with the hotels themselves and driving back those direct bookings. So thank you. Open to any questions. I think I've got 3 minutes before to answer any questions that anybody may have. Do we have a... Thank you, sorry.
Amy, enjoyed that. I liked your point about data is your superpower. And one of the issues that you keep hearing over and over and over is that AI is going to kill websites. Would you say it's actually the opposite, that your website now has to be better than it ever was?
I think it has to be better than it ever was, but I think it has to line up across all sources. What we have been seeing is where AI struggles is when it gets conflicting messages from one of your websites to third-party sites, and that becomes important to sync it all together. So the source of truth of where you have all your data needs to be accurate, the most up-to-date in terms of like rubber stamped of when it was updated. But these other channels are just as important. Our assumption is that when through MCP, they will try to go directly to source. But if they can't get the data from source, they will naturally go through all the other channels. So really, it's a complementary mix of how you kind of define yourself and show up. Thank you.
Hi, Amy. Chris Crowley. I have a question about ratings sites. So my impression is that GEO steers back a little bit towards ratings evaluations because, you know, in the SEO environment, you're asking quite specific one-word question, answers. But GEO does look more for comparison and rating type environments. So suddenly, being the best restaurant on a Tuesday when it's raining is quite valuable to you in terms of what it turns up. Can you comment on that? Because that's more experiential in the response, right?
Yeah, and look, I think reviews is exactly where they kind of want to go and validate, because if they can get real guest reviews, they become very, very important. And I think from a hotel perspective, it's managing and monitoring those reviews and responding to those reviews becomes even more important. And I think where I personally think that little bit of gap is between it is that reviews at present are very much generic. You can't then assign who said what. So give an example. My daughter graduated last year. So I was trying to find a place for a graduation trip in Phuket. And I got all these reviews of really bad. And then I started filtering down into the reviews, and then I realized, oh, it's from older people. It's too noisy, young graduates. I'm like, this is the perfect place. So I think there's taking that information, understanding the reviews, but building up why that kind of like matters, and you know, building that into your strategy, because actually negative reviews can sometimes be in a positive review if you can actually segment it and start addressing it to different audiences. But I think it's a very important channel for everybody to continue to monitor and to look at. Thank you.
Thanks. I have a question, because I'm not from the marketing side, right? I'm from revenue management. But in the search era, that keywords are very important. So hotels are bidding for keywords. But in the era of AI, what is the secret weapon? What is more important? I think you mentioned just now is enable all the channels and contents and tech, like for example, the brand. But is there any other tips that you can provide?
I think so with SEO, it has been very much keyword dominant. And I think that's why it's been very hard for hotels to kind of directly compete, because a lot of it's been bidding. Now, through the AI channels, how are these platforms going to commercialize? Initially, I think we all heard ChatGPT wasn't going to commercialize anything. That's not showing to be the case. We don't know what's going to happen or how they're going to look to kind of promote who shows up. But what they are going to have to do is if they reduce their accuracy because they are not providing or surfacing the right content, someone is going to go to another channel. So for you, the best thing to do is to make sure those long-tail keywords, those things that just rather than just generic search keywords, if you can enrich that at the core, you are laying the foundations for whatever comes next. And I believe for them to stay relevant, they have to still continue to provide the right answers, because that's why people have shifted. And when I talked about earlier, that changing guest behavior from shifting from passive consumption because they were fed off of that biased results, they want more immersive experiences. So the AI platforms, they're going to have to weigh up the kind of like the cost between losing relevance, losing customers, or providing biased results. And we're seeing this and we're just monitoring this space. So all I can say right now is we don't know, but I think just get those foundations in place and protect your core assets, which is really your data.